So, another year is almost over, 2017, and it's actually been a very, very big year for World of Warcraft, possibly the biggest ever in terms of exactly what's come out. When Legion came out, Blizzard always said that this was going to be the one where there's going to be content, regular content, so much content, and they've been true to their word. In fact, going through the year, you can actually say there's been a major development every single month of the year, which I don't think has ever been the case before. 3 raid tiers have come out and been defeated by some guilds at least. That'll never have happened in any calendar year. I haven't gone back and checked, but I'm pretty sure that's never happened in any calendar year. And even within a 12-month period, maybe, I'm not so sure. Not sure, but I haven't checked that one out. But what I'm going to do is basically I'm going to go through each month and say what my picks of the key moments of that month are, with a bit of reflection from my own point of view as well. So January had the release of Nighthold. Now, at the start of January, of course, a lot of people were still on Helya. Mythic Helya, when it first came out, the previous December, or November, sorry, was insanely difficult, like massively difficult. They sort of made it a lot easier, so much easier, in preparation for Nighthold to help some guilds get it down before that came out. Those guilds that didn't do that, some of them, didn't come round to doing it for a long time after it. That's sort of the way it is now with raid tiers. Long gone are the days when people would, do a raid tier. When they finish that raid tier, then they would move to the next, no matter when it came out. Now everyone moves into the new raid tier as soon as it's come out. So yeah, Nighthold came out. That was the first raid tier of Legion, and it was actually pretty good. It was well received. Nice balance there. You had the first boss, which was a complete walkover for most people. The next couple of bosses weren't too bad either. Then you had a nice little choice, and what I quite liked about the Nighthold bosses is you had there were 3 bosses realistically you could sort of go to next. And depending on your guild strengths might determine which one you went to. There wasn't an obvious path to take. Even with some raid tiers, even when you've sort of got a choice, there's still an easier route to take through progress. This wasn't the case there. There were some people that would do one boss first and some another, and it just depended what the strengths of your guild were. So that was pretty good as well. Then we went on to February, and that's when it was actually completed, because Nighthold came out sort of late January. So February was Exorcist getting the world first Gul'dan. Now, they had also got the world first Xavius. So this was establishing them as the team to beat. Bit of a shock. A lot of people were expecting Method, but, or Serenity. I mean, Serenity with a great white hope, so to speak. But Exorcist they were on the march towards the end of Warlords of Draenor, and now they'd established themselves as, the team to beat in Legion. We also got, in March, the Broken Shore. Now, this was a pattern that was to be repeated, which is where, during a raid tier, there's always some things that Blizzard do to ease the passage for other guilds. So the main guilds, the most organised guilds, they have a very tough time of it, but they overcome those challenges. What has generally been done in the past is some bosses will be just nerfed, and that happened again, and that happened as well. Sometimes what they've done in the past is to provide some buff some other way, some other form of buff. Beyond the usual buff, which is to characters, that is, not the bosses, which is just to get better gear. So halfway through Nighthold, we got the Broken Shore being populated, and that meant new traits on our artifact weapon. And that made us significantly more powerful as a result of those. It also meant a bit more of a march onto artifact power grinding again. Then in April, the Mage Tower became active for the first time. Sort of went out with the Broken Shore, but the first time it became active in April. Here was now a piece of content that you could do on your own. It was what Legion's been pretty good at is putting in good solo pieces of content, interesting pieces of content. They don't last, unfortunately. So, we'd already had, for example, the Withered training scenario. Doesn't last you unless you want to farm various things from it. But it was a very nice piece of solo content. Here we had the Mage Tower. main downside is that once you'd beaten it, you weren't allowed to do it again, which is a bit of a shame because it's quite a nice thing. But at the same time, because it wasn't scaled to item level, it only gets easier with more item level. But then that was part of the plan. They didn't want a situation where lots of people still wouldn't be able to do it at the end of Legion, which if they'd scaled it, a bit like the training zones, that would be the case. There would still be a lot of people that would never be able to do it. So they didn't want that. So reasonable challenge for the first people doing it, and then increasingly less so. But you still have to do the mechanics. It's still one of those things where you sort of need to do the mechanics there. In May, we had some significant changes to Mythic Plus. Mythic Plus dungeons have been the huge success story of Legion, I would say. When Legion is all done and dusted, and I don't think it is yet, you can almost feel like we're sort of naturally coming to an end here, and Blizzard are doing nothing to remove that point of view. But we're clearly nowhere near the end of Legion yet. But when it is done and dusted, I still think that Mythic Plus dungeons are going to be the major success of this. But it hasn't all been smooth running. There have been some missteps, and Blizzard, to be fair, have tried to change those. There was a situation where you felt compelled to do lots and lots of Mythic Plus dungeons for the artifact power, if nothing else. So they made some changes here. First of all, they stopped us just wanting to do more souls, because now they changed it so that the amount of artifact power you got from a dungeon depended not only on the level you were doing it at, but how long it was expected to take you. So to beat the timers for the different dungeons are different, because some dungeons would take longer than others. And the ones that should take you the most time gave you the most AP. That way it's supposed to balance it out a little bit better. So if someone got a key for like Halls of Valor or Blackrook Hole, they weren't supposed to go, oh, no one will want to do this. And similarly, if someone got a Maw of Souls key, they were thinking, right, I'm going to get the best team in the world to beast me through this, because they'll want to do it. No, it wasn't like that so much anymore. You also had the keystone itself not being depleted. Now, this was a major thing, because at this point, particularly for people doing it in pugs, if, say, someone just buggered off or disconnected or something like that, or for whatever other reason you were not able to finish the dungeon, then your keystone would be depleted. Now it wouldn't be. It would just get knocked down a level. You'd just lose some power, but you'd still have a viable keystone there. That, again, was a really good change. Very much mostly helping the people that wouldn't be doing it in a team that would be expected to beat the timer comfortably. And the final thing that happened in May was a big month of the year, is that Serenity disbanded, which is a pretty sad piece of news from a neutral's point of view, because at this point we had 3 guilds that we sort of felt were in the World First race. It's always very difficult to know just how many people are in a World First race, but you sort of felt that any of those 3 had the pedigree to get World First. And with Serenity disbanding, it then made it a 2-horse race between Method and Exorcist, which is always quite disappointing, because you're only one step away there from potentially it just being another walkover. Just like it was the worst expansion for this, I suppose, really, would have been Mists of Pandaria, where you had Paragon doing the 10-man and Method doing the 25-man. And there was no race at all. It was just, how quickly are they going to do it? And that was all there was to it. It was just really waiting for the 5th guild to kill it so you could watch Method's kill video or Paragon's kill video. And that was all there was to it there. Into June. Now, with summer, you might expect a little bit of a wind down, but that didn't really happen at all. In June, the Tomb of Sargeras raid opened. So we actually had a raid open in summer. Not for the first time. You've had those before. Hellfire Citadel we had. But it wasn't really their finest hour, was it? The Tomb of Sargeras. The tuning was all over the place. They had over-tuned, particularly the last couple of bosses, even for the top guilds. Largely, it turned out later on because they didn't trust their own internal testing team. They thought that whatever their internal testing team was able to do, that Method and Exorcist would be able to do better. And it's like, okay, if these guys can beat it, it's not hard enough. They sort of learnt the error of that way and trusted them a little bit more. But there were some really great things that came with the Tomb of Sargeras opening as well. First of all was the cinematic, which there's been a lot of cinematics in Legion. Some are more consequential than others, but there's been some pretty good ones. But I would say one of the very best was the end cinematic after you defeated Kil'jaeden. It was certainly a bit of a surprise. And then to see Argus in the sky as well, that did go some way to mitigating against the balancing issues that came with Tomb of Sargeras. There were other issues with Tomb of Sargeras that lasted more long-term as well, but it seems they've learnt from that Antorus. They're not really the case in Antorus, so we'll sort of forgive that one now as well. Into July, right into summer now, and we had Black Temple Time Walking for the first time. Technically, the patch that introduced it had already been out for some time, but we had to wait around for the Burning Crusade Time Walking week. Here is where it came. So I went into Black Temple. It was, as you would expect, a bit of a ruffle stomp. Even for people who didn't really know what they're doing. I remember on the second boss, Supremus, someone pulled a load of trash with the boss. And although it was tough going, we still managed to beat the boss. It was quite spectacular, with hardly anyone knowing what they were doing. Because, of course, when it comes down to it, very few players would actually have played Burning Crusade at the time, and if they did, not that many would have done Black Temple, and even if they did, some of them would have forgotten a few things. I've certainly forgotten a few mechanics that came to mind when I was doing it again there, but most of them were so low, tuned down. I would say that it was even a step below LFR, really. I would say it was a step below LFR, very slightly. But it was still good fun to go back there with a raid as opposed to just going in solo in it. That was still an enjoyable experience. Not that enjoyable for some people, though, apparently, because there was an issue where some people were going in and doing so many of the bosses, and then when they went back in, those bosses were back alive again. So if you weren't able to do it in one go, you struggled to do it at all. And apparently that's something that hadn't been fixed the next time it came around. So that was a bit of a disappointment. But I think for most people that went into it and just basically did it in one go, it was a fun enough experience. Method also reasserted their dominance by getting world first with Tomb of Sargeras and Kil'jaeden. It was a hard fought race, as I say, because Kil'jaeden was so overtuned. It was probably the first time that, sometimes with particularly end bosses in raid instances, and people will talk about, but we killed it pre-nerf. This was probably the first time where not even Method could say they killed it pre-nerfed, because it had to be nerfed while they were still progressing on it. Again, not Blizzard's finest hour on that one, but, we'll give them one. Into August, and we went to Argus. That Argus in the sky there, we actually travelled to it. Saw the Naru and the Void in a different light, if you'll pardon the pun there. And caused a bit of a hoo-ha. It was good and it was bad. It was absolutely fantastic that we were going to Argus. Argus as a world has only really existed in the background story. It's never really been a feature of any of the games, whether Warcraft 1, 2, 3, or any part of World of Warcraft. We all sort of know about it, or we think we know about it. But what we know about it is really just in terms of background stories. The sort of stuff that was written for novels and things like that. So this was the first time where Argus actually became a thing in-game. So very exciting to go there. 3 zones, quite different in style as well. Certainly Makari was very different to the other two. But it did cause a little bit of consternation because the flying, which Blizzard have come to a sort of accord with the community in that they don't want us flying after a few days, all right, because they want to put a lot of detail into the world and they want us to explore it properly. Okay, so we agreed to compromise, bring us it in about a year, a bit later, about 9-10 months into the expansion, we'll have flying. The problem was that the flying came in when the Broken Shore came in. You were able to do the achievements and get flying fairly quickly. It was okay, as long as you'd done the previous achievements. But it's almost like no sooner had people got flying, because it did take, you had to do some stuff to get flying, even when the Broken Shore went live. No sooner had some people got flying than off we go to Argus, where there's no flying. Now, of course, there could never be any flying with the way it had to be designed. Like I said at the time, a lot of people don't buy it, but I said at the time, Blizzard sort of said later on as well, there was no way of designing the 3 zones for Argus in a way that would have allowed flying. Because it's all smoke and mirrors. The Argus zones are a very rough job. It's literally smoke and mirrors in terms of giving it a 3D feel. It's not really. And so there's no flying there. And that's where we've sort of been since. So the sooner it's almost like, well, why are we flying there? Why? It's like you've not even given us flying. That was the view of a lot of people anyway. So a little bit bittersweet there. Into September, and something on which I think a lot of people were not very happy about. A major piece of content, which was the great evil was unleashed, the Pandora's box, the Netherlight Crucible. And never again are we to know whether a relic is an upgrade or not. It's like, it's this upgrade. It's 10 item levels upgrade. Fantastic. Oh, it's got a Bis trait on it. Wow. I'm not quite sure it's an upgrade. I don't know. I need to put it in the Netherlight Crucible. And when I do this, by the way, I bind it to myself. So if it's not, I can't really give it to someone else. The Netherlight Crucible was probably, if Mythic Plus dungeons were the greatest triumph of Legion, and there have been several, the Netherlight Crucible is probably there when they've sunk their lowest. Because although there are features, again, that were not really appreciated, the Netherlight Crucible had very strong opposition to it long before it went live. As soon as it was revealed how it was going to work, there was very organised and vocal opposition to the way it worked. Not the fact that it was going to be a thing, but the way it was going to work. All we have to hope is that Blizzard, at this point, were thinking, well, we're committed now. We can't really think of a better way of doing it. We've got other projects we need to be getting on with. Because you can understand the time pressure. I think there's probably on the developers more time pressure than at any other point in the past. Because usually Blizzard's attitude is, we're going to release stuff when it's ready. Right, when it's ready. And if something's not ready for a patch, well, we're not going to release it that patch then. We might not release it at all. Player housing, for example. So this time, it's like, no. We've got this very keen schedule. We've got this schedule. We're all going to stick to it. We've got our jobs to do. So it's almost like, you can imagine them being committed to things in a way that maybe they wouldn't have done in the past. And maybe the Netherlight Crucible is one of the casualties of being able to bring out content on such a tight schedule like this. The best hope we can have is that they acknowledge that it's not the sort of thing that we really enjoy, and we won't get any of it in the next expansion. That's the great hope. The other thing that came out in September was the audio drama Terralion and Illyria, which threw, again, some established lore into chaos. So we've re-evaluated the way we see certain things now, particularly around the light and the void. That's all in there. The Legion itself, I mean, the Nathrazim were originally sort of demons. That's how they were very much presented in the lore in the past. Whereas now, well, they are demons, but they're demons that have been changed into demons from a race that were just a normal race, just like the Eridar, apparently. But there were lots of other interesting things in there as well, in terms of Illyria being able to use the void, not be corrupted by it, and going to pass that on to others now. So we're going to be getting the Void Elves as an allied race now. And that's something that really came in the next month. So in October, I would say probably of all the months in October, there wasn't anything major added to the game itself, the live version of the game, unless you count making a load of gnome sweat. But there was some information data mined, and the most interesting of which was someone finding clues to these allied races, sub-races as we call them at the time, because this is something that people have been wanting for a long time, customization. And, I mean, the big example that we've been asking for is like Dark Iron Dwarfs, especially as Dark Iron Dwarfs, okay, in vanilla, you very much build as the enemies. But now they're very much part of the fold in the Alliance. And in fact, if anything, taking a leading role. So it seemed a bit of a nonsense that you couldn't actually play a Dark Iron Dwarf. Well, now we're going to be able to. And at BlizzCon, this was later confirmed. But October was the month where the information was being data mined. We didn't get all 6 allied races at the time. There was 4 of them that were indicated in this data mined information. All very exciting there. And then November itself came BlizzCon. And not only did we get information about the new expansion, which was very much expected, but for the first time ever, we got the cinematic for the expansion at the announcement. That doesn't happen. The cinematic generally exclusively is revealed when they announce the release date. So typically with an expansion, they announce the release date about 2 months before the release date itself. And then we get the cinematic. Legion changed it up a little bit, because with Legion, we got the announcement of the date 4 months before it was released, sorry. But we still got the cinematic at that time. So here we're getting the cinematic, not when they announced the release date, but when they announced the expansion. Now that's the first. And it was a breathtaking cinematic as well. Clearly their best. You keep seeing, don't you, top 5, top 10 in game cinematic, stuff like that. And whenever for World of Warcraft, it's always the Wrath of the Lich King one. I really don't think so now. I think if people still vote for that one now, they're doing it just purely for nostalgia. This is clearly, I'm not even going to accept that this is subjective, the best cinematic that there has ever been for World of Warcraft. Not just the best quality, but the best cinematic from any point of view that you can imagine. Few details as to exactly what's coming in the expansion. Lots of what they usually do at this time is it's very aspirational. This is what we want. This is what we want to happen. This is how we want you to behave, blah, 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 blah. And then lots of people will read things into it and think to themselves, well, it's obviously going to work like this. Well, we don't know any of those things yet. But there was another announcement at BlizzCon, which arguably was even bigger, if truth be told. Certainly in terms of the interest it's generated, it's bigger. And that is the news of classic WoW servers being brought to us from Blizzard. No news since, no news about a timeline. I was talking about this on my stream last night. The fact is, the team that's going to be doing this is not in place yet. And when it is, they're not going to do it like the next week. So don't expect this to come out soon. My hope is that there will at least be a date announced by the next BlizzCon. If by the time we get to the next BlizzCon they still can't at least give a date for release, that would be a bit more worrying. I think there'll be some, disconcerted fans there. So I think that certainly by the time next BlizzCon comes out, if it isn't already out, and it would probably be a good thing if it was, but if it wasn't, then at least have a date by then, I think. There's still a lot of things to iron out. I know a lot of people think it's fairly straightforward. And in terms of the mechanical things of it, I think it would be relatively straightforward as well. I think it's the decisions that have to be made. And some people just don't think there's any decisions to be made at all. There are big decisions that have to be made. Even for classic means classic. But yeah, that was probably the huge news there. That almost overshadowed the expansion. Now, of course, there are some people that are not at all interested in Classic, and their focus will be very much on the expansion. I'm much more excited about the expansion than I am Classic WoW, even though I very much appreciate both bits of news. But certainly, in terms of videos being produced, the ones that were talking about Classic WoW were just straight up getting more views than the ones talking about the expansion in the immediate aftermath. Obviously, that's died down a little bit simply because we have no more news on Classic WoW, whereas for the expansion stuff, lots more news did come out about that. And then on to December as well, and Method re-established their dominance, so they've got World First in Antorus, which had opened technically in November, right at the end of November there, but December was really the month of Antorus. Method got their World First, reasonably dominant. It's always very difficult to say how close behind Exorcist were, because obviously when you're going for World First as Exorcist were, and you hear that someone else has got their first, you're not likely to carry on with your pause. You're likely to, take a few hours, chill out. You're not going to get World First now. That you're significantly ahead of World Third. You're going to get World Second. So take a bit of a break, come back, shake yourself down and just get on with it. So although it was like a good day after that Exorcist did it, I think, it may have actually been closer than that, but it did seem to be reasonably dominant from Method there. Which does mean, and so Exorcists were close enough behind that you'd sort of think that they could, at any time still get the world first. So you still sort of accept there's a race there. As long as they both keep doing what they're doing, there is at least a world first race going there. It's a shame that it's only between two. And that I think certainly after this tier, it almost looks like Method just have that slight edge. Exorcist started the expansion really well. Method have finished it very strongly. If there's another raid, will there be as much prestige attached to the world first? Not really sure. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, if you put it like that way, you could argue that so far Method have got 3 world first as opposed to Exorcist 2, because Method also got Hellier first. But I'm not really sure if a similar raid would have the same prestige. But there will still be a race there, and it would still be interesting, even though it's not a tier raid, a prestige raid from there. And that's where we are with 2017. My main thought really is, unfortunately, we don't know a lot about 2018. What do we know that's coming in 2018? Well, with the next patch, we know that they're bringing the zone scaling in. I've got some very choice thoughts about that I need to sit down and talk about at some point. We know that the allied races are coming. We know that there's a few features that were talked about at BlizzCon that are coming during Legion, and they're not waiting for the new expansion, including the ability to decide for yourself whether you are a PvE or a PvP player with a toggle. So no longer are you, forced into being ganked, basically, because you're on a PvP server. And again, I know that's confusing for some people, but at the end of the day, we're on PvP servers, a lot of us that don't actually like PvP in World of Warcraft, because that's where the guilds are. Guilds are on PvP servers. Raiding guilds, that is. I don't know why. I have no idea why, but that's just a thing. That's how it is. But yeah, we'll actually get the choice, the genuine choice, and just toggle ourselves. You know what? I'm a PvE player. That. And so that will be good, and that will be coming before BFA as well. But in terms of actual Legion content, we don't know. We know that there must be some stuff still to come, because we know that Battle for Azeroth is not even guaranteed to come out in 2018. We very much hope it will. But Blizzard have said it is their aim to get it out by the end of 2018. That, to me, means that at the moment, their aim is late 2018, give or take, but it might sneak into 2019. So that means that we've got a whole load of 2018 still with Legion. Obviously, we're not going to be looking at a content drought. We cannot do that. Blizzard have been really good in producing regular content. We've just seen here, month by month, there's been new content in the game. There's been new stuff to do. And I haven't even talked about some of the minor stuff that wasn't of major consequence, such as, for example, the micro holidays, the Trial of Style, all the little bits like that, saving Chromie, all those little things, which were also well-received bits of content that, for me, just not as major news, so I haven't talked about those. To then go into 2018 and basically have nothing new other than the zone scaling, allied races, and being able to flick a switch to say whether a PvP or PvE player, that's not going to be enough, is it? And that would turn Legion from triumph to disaster, if I can borrow a line from Kipling. And that's not going to happen. That clearly isn't going to happen. But they haven't really told us what is coming, which is a bit weird. But maybe we will in the new year. Obviously, in the new year, we're also expecting very soon now for the BFA Alpha, Beta, whatever you want to call it, to open up with invitation only, of course. But it might include a few random people. So if you want to get involved in that Alpha, Beta process, make sure you've flagged yourself as being interested in it on your account settings. And that's where we are. So I hope you enjoyed 2017. It's been very much up and down for me personally in the game, as I think it has for a few people. But overall, I think from Blizzard's point of view, I think it has been a triumph, even though there's been a few things that I wish they'd done very differently. That's my review. Let me know what yours is below. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to give it a like. It really helps. Do comment down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share it with others who might also be interested. And until next time, I'll see you later and have a great 2018.